Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine McCallan, and I'm the director of the UTRGV Center for Latin American Arts. And I wanted to thank you all for being here today. We are honored to have Akemi here visiting us from the Meadows Museum of Art at SMU in Dallas. And it's been a real joy to get to know Akemi over this last year since she participated in our Congreso de Arte Virreinal in Lima last summer. And I'll just present a little information about Akemi and let her take it away with her presentation. Akemi Luisa Harráez is currently a curatorial fellow at the Meadows Museum in Dallas at SMU. And she holds that post within the Center for Spain in the Americas at SMU. And Akemi has also held curatorial posts at the National Gallery in London and also the Getty Museum in LA. And at the National Gallery in London, she assisted with curating 2 exhibitions on the Spanish artists Bartolome and Joaquin Sorolla. And today she will talk about Spanish painting and curatorial practices in the museum field, as well as her academic research as an art historian. And Akemi is originally from Madrid, Spain, and she completed her undergraduate training in Cambridge at Cambridge University and graduated in 2013 as an undergrad. And then she moved on to complete her master's at Edinburgh University, graduated in 2014, and she's currently a PhD candidate at Cambridge University, and she just submitted her dissertation a few weeks ago titled Francisco de Zurbarán and his workshops painting production for the New World, trade, collections, and reception. And her doctoral thesis expands beyond Spain, considering the presence of paintings in Latin America by the 17th century Spanish artist Francisco de Zurbarán. And last July in 2019, it was a true honor for Akemi to be one of our participants at the International Symposium El Congreso de Arte Virreinal, El Futuro del Arte del Pasado in Lima, Peru, hosted by Veronica Muñoz Najar and I, and sponsored very generously by the Toma Foundation in conjunction with Harvard University, the Mali Museum, the Fundación Homa, and the Center for Latin American Arts at UTRGV. So it's really exciting to think about all of our work coming together and continuing on in these events and dialogues. And Akemi gave a beautiful lecture at the Congreso, and it was an honor to work with her in Lima. And now it's just a true delight to be working with her again and connecting her to our students at UTRGV who are so talented. And tonight, Akemi is going to discuss a variety of topics related to Spanish painting, the transatlantic movement of images, curatorial and fellowship opportunities, museum careers, and other opportunities related to the study of Latin American art. So please join us in welcoming Akemi for her lecture, Curatorial Internships and Fellowships, Preparation, Experiences, and Advice. Welcome, Akemi.
Thank you very much for that kind and generous presentation. I do fondly remember the conference last year, and I hope we can all meet in person soon and that all of you and your families are in good health during these hard times. And I especially hope to really visit your center, the Center for Latin American Studies, once it's possible. Since I'm in Dallas, I'm closer than ever now. So thank you very much, Catherine. It is my great pleasure to share advice on curatorial careers and mention some of my own experiences. My interest in pursuing a curatorial career has led to several curatorial fellowships in Europe and in the United States. The most recent fellowships focused on Spanish art projects covering broad periods and geographical spans. Some of the key questions discussed in this lecture include what academic path one should take to become a curator, how to apply to the right fellowships, and how flexibility is a crucial aspect in pursuing this career. I will also focus on how to develop research on a museum's permanent collection, as well as upcoming exhibitions. This will incorporate personal experiences, including two recent exhibition projects on the Spanish artists Joaquín Sorolla and Bartolome Bermejo at London's National Gallery. I will also consider how my doctoral research on the Spanish Baroque artist Francisco de Zurbarán and his reception in the New World determined my interest in transatlantic exchanges and projects dealing with this topic. This connection to the Americas is especially relevant in Texas, where there is a prominent Hispanic community. Before giving an overview of my own path towards a curatorial career, I will outline the key aspects one should consider both academically and curatorially when preparing oneself to work in museums. Three main aspects I encourage you to strengthen are your ability to work with and describe objects to the general public, as well as an academic scholarly public, being able to develop language skills. Having additional languages is actually a great asset, especially in a multicultural state such as Texas, and also daring to travel and try new things. From a young age, I was brought up bilingually, speaking Spanish and English at home, and my parents often took me to the Prado Museum where I would spend hours sketching in Madrid. I therefore encourage you to go to your local museums and engage as much as possible with the collections, exploring objects which can appeal to you aesthetically, historically, and/or for personal reasons. In terms of academic preparation, I recommend that you pursue a college degree in art history if possible, but it is also possible to switch later on when starting a graduate degree. During college, it is important to explore areas beyond the academic sphere if it is possible and you want to see other fields which are plausible with art history, such as museums, heritage sites, auction houses, libraries, and other cultural institutions. For example, during my summer breaks, I worked at a museum, an auction house, and gave historical tours of my university campus. I started by volunteering at Madrid's Prado Museum, where I sold memberships and gallery guides. A year later, I volunteered at London's auction house Christie's. There I worked in the 19th century paintings department, where I cataloged the paintings and prepared them for the fall sale. Such an experience was unique, as at auction houses, you handle objects directly and you conduct your research on these objects for the sale catalog in a very short time span. My third position consisted of giving campus tours of Cambridge University to tourists and groups of students. It was especially important to be able to adapt the tour to different audiences and choose different sites according to their interests. Sorry. So now I would like to move on to my experience at the J. Paul Getty Museum. This was actually my first year of a curatorial experience. It went from 2014 to 2015. I worked in the paintings department, where I conducted provenance research, assisted with the preliminary research for the exhibition's Eyewitness Views, Making History in 18th Century Europe, and Unruly Nature, the Landscapes of Théodore Rousseau, and assisted with tours and display of the permanent collection and the spring exhibition, Turner Painting Set Free. I especially encourage students who are in the process of or have completed their master's or PhD to apply for this internship. There are other positions available in the following curatorial departments, including paintings, drawings, and prints, photographs, decorative arts, sculpture, manuscripts, and antiquities. You can also intern in other areas such as cataloging, design, conservation and preservation, publications, web and new media, Latin American art, and modern and contemporary art, which are held at the Getty Museum, the Getty Research Center, the Getty Conservation Institute, the Getty Trust, and the Getty Villa. There are many institutions. I know it's confusing with all of them. It is especially enriching to work in a museum with so many departments and fellow interns, as there is a varied program designed for them, and there are other chances to collaborate between departments, especially in preparation for upcoming exhibitions and research projects. One aspect I especially enjoyed was that I was given a budget to travel to visit museums, meet curators, and attend talks anywhere in the world for 2 weeks. I chose the East Coast of the United States as there were several museums there with prominent Spanish and Latin American art collections I wanted to see. And I had the incredible opportunity of meeting curators from several museums there. You can find more about the Getty's graduate internships online. The deadline for next year's graduate internships is January 14th, so don't miss out. Whereas most of my research projects and exhibition projects at the Getty Museum focused on European painting, I knew that I was interested in topics that expanded beyond Spain. That's why actually during my master's degree, I started working on Islamic medieval Spain and its reception in 19th century Spain. This was a very exciting time as I learned Arabic, and I also had the opportunity to travel to cities in Spain with important Islamic sites, such as Córdoba, Granada, and Toledo. But despite enjoying this topic, I realized that to truly master an understanding of Islamic art, I really had to have a core knowledge of Arabic. And I would also have to extend my research to North Africa, amongst several places such as Morocco, Tunisia. And there, without the language skills, it's quite tricky, and there is also limited access to certain sites. So that compounded with my flourishing interest in colonial missions that I had seen during my time at the Getty around California, as well as colonial Latin American art collections I enjoyed visiting, such as LACMA in California. I decided that I wanted to focus on Latin American art. Since I hadn't had the chance to study it actually during my undergraduate studies, my supervisor at the Getty Museum, Peter Kerber, recommended that I approached it from a European perspective, focusing on an artist who was actively involved in Latin America. Suddenly, I thought, well, Francisco de Zurbarán sounds like the ideal option, actually, because he was active in Baroque Spain, and that's an area I had a knowledge in. And he was actually the most active 17th century Spanish artist that was renowned at his time, because there were other lesser known artists that were more in his circle or milieu, but these artists that were actively exporting to the Americas weren't as well known as Zurbarán and often didn't have identifiable works attributed to them. And it was also interesting to focus on him because he was active in Seville, which was the main Spanish port to the Americas in the 17th century until it was superseded by Cadiz in the 18th century, no? So being able to work on both Spanish and Latin American art was also a great asset, as it enabled me to apply for positions in both fields. Whereas in the United States, there is a greater interest in Latin American art history, in Europe, this largely focuses on Spain, so it enabled me to leave both options open. So I want to go back and consider why I chose King's College, Cambridge, to pursue this PhD. At the time, I knew that I had a strong link to my supervisor there because I had been an undergraduate student at Cambridge University, and he was very keen on supervising me, having taught and supervised many students dealing with global topics at Cambridge. So I thought that it was a perfect option. especially since he was very open to accepting new doctoral students. This I really encourage you to do when you're applying for a PhD, is to really reach out to your PhD supervisor first, and then see if he's willing to accept doctoral students, and that hopefully can help you determine what university you want. It's also interesting because in many curatorial and academic positions nowadays it's quite competitive, so it's recommended to pursue your studies and focus on a PhD, no? After your master's or after your undergraduate degree, no? Another thing is that in Europe, PhDs normally are 3 to 4 years long, and you start them by focusing on your chosen topic. So I already knew after my master's that I really wanted to focus on Francisco de Zurbarán and his relationship to the Americas. So then it became very clear that I preferred the European system because there's no coursework involved actually in Europe, and that's why it's faster. And I also wanted to conduct my PhD in English and be closer to many of the sites I wanted to see in Spain. But this was only possible actually with the exceptional studentship offered by the Centro de Estudios Europa Hispánica, which is based in Madrid, and has a website where there are many other universities actually in the UK and Ireland that offer scholarships, studentships, that sponsor PhDs for students willing to pursue a career and research on Spanish art. So I really encourage you to look at their website. You have the title of the center below, and you can just type that into Google if you have a chance. So I want to return to my thesis topic. Even though there has been previous research on Francisco de Zurbarán's relation to the New World, this has mostly focused on formal aspects of his work exported overseas, overemphasized his importance in Mexico, whereas actually most of his production and his greatest impact was in South America, specifically in and around Lima. And many studies on his activities overseas centered on individual case studies rather than offering a comprehensive survey. There are, for example, 2 paintings from series of apostles and archangels Zurbarán and or his workshop members produced and exported to the New World. Here, for example, I show this this Archangel Michael and also the Apostle Saint Bartholomew. These paintings within larger series of 15 paintings in the case of the Apostles, because it also includes Saint Judas, the Virgin and Christ, and then 6 paintings in the case of 7 paintings in the case of the Archangels, are held in Limanian convents and monasteries. And there are actually reinterpretations of these by colonial artists that are found in remote areas of Peru and Bolivia. Many of these colonial reinterpretations are not illustrated in books. And since archival research on collecting practices of Spain, of Spanish painting during the colonial period in Peru are scant, I decided to conduct most of my research in Peru, also traveling to Bolivia, Colombia, and Mexico, where there are also works by Zurbarán and his followers. Such research was possible thanks to travel grants included in my studentship by the department and by the Spanish Bank Santander. For those of you considering research abroad, I greatly encourage you not only to look for grants within your university and department, but also external grants, such as the Toma Foundation, which mainly sponsors research on colonial South American art. With their support, as Catherine mentioned, I was able to travel to Lima to participate in the symposium she organized with Verónica Muñoz Nájar. And there I presented my research on Zurbarán and his presence in Limanian collections. In the third year of my PhD, I had the opportunity to organize a conference titled Artistic Trade Between Spain and its Viceroyalties from 1500 to 1800 at King's College, Cambridge. For this conference, I invited young and established scholars from Europe and the United States and considered how artworks were produced, exported, collected, and displayed in Spain and the Viceroyalties. My main aim was to promote colonial Latin American art studies in the United Kingdom, as there are scarce, these studies are mostly scarce and are mainly taught in Spanish and Latin American art departments, which focus more on archaeological, literary, and historical aspects. It was also important to host this conference to bring a group of scholars over to look at a series of colonial paintings that were recently donated to the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. It was a great opportunity as I had the chance to briefly catalog these paintings, but it was very enriching to discuss them with experts, because then we discussed at more length their possible place of production, the subject matter, and also discuss their materiality. Unfortunately, many of these are actually in not a very good state of conservation and therefore are not currently on display in the museum. But if you ever venture to the Fitzwilliam Museum, you can always make a request to see them in the study room, which is where we saw them just before the conference. I also had the great opportunity of putting together a selection of King's Library's printed books on Spain and Latin America for a little display we saw and discussed during the conference. I especially encourage you actually during your doctoral research to reach out to your departments or libraries where you can have actually collections related to your own research and set up exhibitions and perhaps organize talks or even a symposium conference which relate to this exhibition and are connected. This was a wonderful stepping stone for me, and especially making the most of the collections we had at the university. And before actually finishing my PhD, I was appointed the Centro de Estudios Europa Hispánica Curatorial Fellow in Spanish Paintings at London's National Gallery. The National Gallery offers 22-month fellowships for graduate students focusing on European painting from different periods. And Spanish painting, for example, Spanish painting, also theology and art is one topic. You can also work in the conservation department and the scientific department. Those pursuing curatorial fellowships mostly either have completed their master's, are enrolled in a PhD, or have finished their PhD. Candidates are chosen according to how their research suits the current and upcoming projects, their curatorial experience, and the outcome of an interview, which includes a section devoted to visual analysis. Unlike the Getty Museum, the National Gallery is mainly devoted to Spanish painting from the medieval period to the early 20th century, although there are also contemporary artworks by artists active in the United Kingdom and that also connect to global topics, no? Despite the small number of Spanish works, there are about 70 out of over 2,300 paintings. These are of a supreme quality, including masterpieces such as Diego Velázquez Roque by Venus and Francisco de Zurbarán's Saint Francis in Meditation. I was fortunate to write about many of these pieces for the website. There are short summaries of all of the paintings in the National Gallery collection, which are incredible tools if you ever need to research any of these paintings. I also had the pleasure to work on rehangs of the Spanish paintings and conduct specific research on certain paintings, such as Zurbarán's Saint Francis, which was recently restored in the conservation department and which actually had 2 black bands on the sides obscuring the incredible effect that you get of this spotlight hitting the St. Francis as he is meditating with the skull. I also had the privilege actually of presenting my doctoral research to both the general public as well as for a group of academics and curators and students. Now I would like to move on to the two main exhibitions I was involved in at the National Gallery. These were on the Spanish artists Bartolome Bermejo and Joaquín Sorolla. I was especially lucky actually, as 2019 was the year devoted to Spanish projects and exhibitions, and this involved both a smaller one gallery display of Bermejo, but also the major retrospective of Sorolla. So starting with the Sorolla exhibition, this was quite a special occasion, as there had not been an exhibition devoted to this artist in the United Kingdom since 1908. This exhibition featured emblematic paintings by him, painted mostly in Valencia, but also in Madrid and other parts of Spain, which focus on beach scenes, locotypes, portraits, and landscapes. Apart from working in Spain, he also traveled a lot to the United States, and he met this important patron called Archer Huntington, who funded the Hispanic Society of America in New York. And if you have a chance, I encourage you to visit an exhibition on the Hispanic Society's highlights at Houston's Museum of Fine Arts, which includes actually paintings by Sorolla, but also incredible colonial Latin American paintings if you're interested. So going back to Sorolla, when he met Huntington, Huntington wanted him to paint a series of canvases representing the different regions of Spain, mostly focusing on local types and landscapes, which he painted between 1913 and 1919. Apart from the American patrons, actually, Sorolla also exported his work to other Latin American countries such as Cuba, Argentina, and Chile, where he had important patrons. So we have to consider, even though this area wasn't considered in this exhibition, I consider it very important because we forget that Sorolla was not only prominent in North America, but also in Latin America. So what was very exciting about this project was that I actually joined towards the end of it during the last year, but it was actually an exhibition that was several years in the making. When I started, I began by contributing, writing some catalog entries for the exhibition catalog, followed by discussions actually on the display of the exhibition, and securing last-minute loans under the mentorship of Chris Riopel, curator of post-1800 paintings at the National Gallery. We were very fortunate, as most of the loans came from Madrid's Sorolla Museum, and we had the support of the museum's director, Consuelo Luca de Tena, as well as Sorolla's great-granddaughter, Blanca Pons Sorolla, who has written multiple books and catalog resumes on Sorolla's oeuvre. A couple months before the exhibition's inauguration, I also had the pleasure of spending time in Sorolla City, Valencia, where I was filmed on the beach, actually discussing Sorolla's paintings for the exhibition film. And I joined a group of journalists admiring Sorolla's masterpieces and promoting the exhibition in Valencia and Madrid, actually. These were mostly British journalists that were keen to discover his work in Spain before seeing it in the exhibition. So it was a wonderful trip getting to know the paintings in situ with the experts. The most exciting part, although I must say the previous parts were also really exciting, was the installation, which actually took about 2 weeks and included couriers from museums and collections from all over Europe and the United States. The 7 exhibition galleries were organized thematically, starting with Sorolla's family, portraits, his early prize paintings, portraits of friends and family, his beach scenes, the provinces of Spain, landscapes, and ending with his emblematic outdoor scenes. You can see, for example, the photo to the left of the foyer where the designer of the exhibition, Belén Cao, tried to evoke the effect of light passing through leaves and this outdoor feeling in an underground space, because there's actually no natural light in the Sainsbury Wing exhibition space at the National Gallery, with a photo of Sorolla painting outdoors. And I really liked the detail of the title, which was actually illuminated with light. It's not the poster. So apart from these amazing design effects, what was interesting was the texts were in English and Spanish. There was also an audio guide in both languages with comments by Sorolla's great-granddaughter, Blanca Pons Sorolla, and by contemporary Spanish artists. The preparation and completion of the exhibition was only possible, as I mentioned, with the collaboration of other departments, such as the design department, but also education, picture research, publications, and most importantly, exhibitions. They're the ones that dealt with all the loan letters, the request, the financial administrative matters. So it was a very solid team, no? And we constantly were in consultation from the start of the exhibition planning. This all culminated with the inauguration, which was led by Queen Letizia of Spain and Prince Charles. After several months, the exhibition actually traveled to its second venue at Ireland's National Gallery, where Sorolla's work was shown for the first time to the Irish public. So not only was it admired in the UK for almost the first time in 100 years, but it was greatly admired in Ireland. Then came another exhibition project, very different in subject matter and scale, but nonetheless also really exciting. It was on the Spanish 15th century artist Bartolome Bermejo, and this exhibition was curated by Leticia Treves. It was also several years in the making, but I joined towards the end. And what was exciting about this artist is that he's basically unknown, even in Spain. And there are about 20 works attributed to the artist. There's a very small group of works. It was also very interesting to work on this artist because the National Gallery actually has the only work by Bermejo in the United Kingdom, which is the St. Michael Triumphant, which you can see on your left. And what was interesting is that it had recently been conserved, so it was in its full glory. This painting actually was before in 2 exhibitions, which were hosted at the Prado Museum and at the Manac Museum in Barcelona. These ones actually looked at Bermejo not only as an individual artist, but as a collaborator with disciples and contemporaries, whereas the National Gallery exhibition was an in-focus exhibition with 7 works by him and 1 document related to the St. Michael Commission. This was very exciting because St. Michael was also, Bermejo was active, was supposedly born in Cordoba. We don't know for sure, in the south of Spain, but he was mostly active in the northeast of Spain, mostly around Valencia and Barcelona, where there were many artists coming from different areas, such as Italy or the Netherlands, which had an impact on his work and that of contemporary artists. And you can even recall paintings by Flemish artists such as Van Eyck and the St. Michael you're seeing there, which with this incredible, painted incredibly with oil paint. At this point, you must consider that oil paint was a technique that was just starting to be used. Until then, it was mostly tempera. And Bermejo was certainly one of the best artists, if not the best, active in the second part of the 15th century in Spain. So to really glorify this little known artist, we prepared this exhibition, and I had the pleasure of contributing an essay to the catalog, which was titled Painting in the Time of Bartolome Bermejo, considering his historical context, local Flemish and Italian artistic influences in Eastern Spain, where he was active in the 15th century, how this was conditioned by religious repression, and the structure of artistic guilds and workshops during that period. Whereas with Sorolla's subjects were easily accessible, even to those that did not have the appropriate historical and cultural context, these two aspects were crucial in understanding Bermejo's work. It was therefore paramount to convey the religious and historical background of Bermejo's work to an English-speaking and mostly non-Catholic audience. So there was a lot of research to be done more on the contextual factors to present it to a different audience to that in Spain. So actually both exhibitions also included a series of talks, studies, days, and conferences aimed at the general public, students, academics, and curators. These included a one-day conference on Sorolla at the Spanish Embassy in London and a study day on Bermejo held in the exhibition space. Here, for example, you see me giving a presentation on the Sorolla exhibition at the Spanish Embassy in London. And then on the right, you see my supervisor, Leticia Treves, talking about the conservation of the St. Michael, looking at both how it was when they just removed the repainted areas. You have like a large scale print showing the removed areas, which were then carefully retouched, as we see in the painting. This was incredibly interesting as I was able to adapt to different audiences, working with the general public, academics, journalists. It was also very important to have Spanish as a language skill. Otherwise, it would have been much more complicated to get all of the loans we had, lead the tours, deal with lenders. It's an incredible asset. Believe me, if you have the time, either work on languages you already have or expand and learn new languages. And it was also really useful to have these Spanish skills, to also be acquainted with academic research around these artists, of which there are some bits in English, but it's mostly in Spanish, actually. So before joining after this time at the National Gallery, I just recently started a Curatorial Fellowship and at the Meadows Museum, which specializes in Spanish art, but also has some artworks by 20th century Mexican artists. This was very exciting as I had already collaborated with the Meadows Museum on an essay on the exhibition on Francisco de Zurbarán's Tribes of Israel paintings, of which some series, which were destined to the Americas supposedly, and they're actually copies in Mexico and Peru. So I wrote this essay, but I didn't have the chance to travel to Texas to see the exhibition. So I finally am here and I'm very excited to work with the Spanish art collection. I actually started my first weeks actually talking about my favorite painting in the collection, which is a Dwarf Michol by the Spanish 17th century artist Carreño de Miranda, who holds two impressive cockatoos, which were probably brought from Asia via the Americas, probably. And I also participated in a course devoted to Spanish art in Britain and Ireland. And at the moment, I'm really keen to work on certain works that have an affinity with the New World, such as this double-sided copper of St. Francis and St. Thomas of Aquinas, painted by the Spanish artist Alonso López de Herrera in Mexico, seen on the left. For those of you working on Spanish art who are enrolled in or have completed a PhD, I encourage you to apply for the predoctoral and postdoctoral curatorial fellowships at the Meadows Museum. My predoctoral position is 1 year, whereas the postdoctoral positions are 2 years. And these offer actually excellent research opportunities as well as travel grants to conduct research both locally and abroad. So apart from the Meadows, there are other curatorial internships and fellowships in the United States, such as the National Gallery in Washington, the Metropolitan Museum, the Frick Museum, and the Guggenheim Museum in New York. There are also increasing number of programs and internships dealing with racial issues, LGBT rights, and global histories, which you might be interested in. If these opportunities are not available near you, you can research an object that responds to these matters or any personal interest presented in your college or university, and involve, if you can, local communities to promote these artworks locally, which is also a very important aspect apart from traveling and researching abroad. I hope this talk has provided an overview of the curatorial internships and fellowships available and how you can prepare yourself for these. Once you have gained sufficient curatorial experience and have completed your graduate studies, you will be able to apply for permanent positions and leave your mark in the museum world. If you would like more information on these fellowships and internships mentioned or academic advice for a curatorial career, please contact the organizer, Catherine McGallen, for my email. I hope you and your families are in good health, as I mentioned at the beginning, and I am truly honored to speak to all of you, and I hope this encourages you to pursue a curatorial career or academia or any other art history related topic. But hopefully this talk will have sparked your interest in the museum world and the multiple options available. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Oops. Thank you so much, Akemi. What a wonderful talk. So much information and a lot of great questions in the Q&A. My first question for you is going to be from a student who asked a question about looking for grants. Can you give us just a brief comment on how you looked for grants to be able to study in these museum curatorial positions, and what kind of experience did you need? Are there prerequisites or anything? Another student asked about what is the best way to navigate the competitive process when applying for internships and fellowships. What's the most important emphasis you can make on improving your CV, et cetera?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, those are wonderful questions. Well, one useful website is the Association for Art Museums, AAM, and you can look that online. They advertise both permanent and actually temporary positions. There's also a newsletter called H-Art-Hist, is in art history, but abbreviated. I can send, if you want, the list to Catherine later to share with you if you want specifically. And this website is actually organized, this newsletter is organized in Germany and has mostly opportunities in Europe, but also includes American opportunities. And I also encourage you to talk with fellow teachers, because they also might know of specific fellowships. I found out, for example, of the Getty one through my master's supervisor at Edinburg University. And once you are in this world, it is quite easy to kind of track down the several fellowship opportunities available, because it becomes kind of like a solid nucleus. As I mentioned, there are several in the United States, like at the Getty here in Dallas, but also in New York and Washington at the main museums there. In terms of preparation and how you make yourself competitive and have a good CB, actually what I would count on more than anything is having a curatorial experience, no matter what it is, even if it's just selling starting by selling gallery guides, memberships as an undergrad, giving tours. These are all very valid and useful opportunities that you should do, maybe working in the information desk, giving talks on your favorite objects if you want in the collection. This is what really granted me my first solid one-year position at the Getty Museum. They were very interested, actually, in the fact that I had been at the Prado Museum as a volunteer, even if I was mostly helping with lectures or selling gallery guides and memberships. These were certainly very valid assets. And obviously having the language skills are very important. And also it depends on what exhibitions they're preparing. So it might also be your luck. For example, when I joined the Getty, they were organizing an exhibition on Rubens and and the tapestries that were made after his sketches, actually, which are in Madrid in the Descalzas convent. So it's both preparation, but there's also sometimes an element of luck. So what I would recommend as well is to be really much and try to follow what the upcoming program is in the said museum you're applying for, no? And seeing whether you're also suited for their program and also their permanent collection, and see whether your interests match those in the permanent collection, no?
Okay, excellent points. I had a question too from a student, or actually former student, who is an associate at the Center for Latin American Arts. And this is from Daniel. What is your advice for checking the veracity of original images in collections that are not digitized when organizing an art exhibition, specifically private collections? For example, the Sorolla or Bermejo show. Do you ever encounter moments where you have to authenticate the artworks?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We thankfully, especially for Sorolla, where there were more loans, we had the help from Blanca Pons Sorolla, the great-granddaughter of Sorolla, who had seen many of these paintings in private collections and was working on the catalog Raisonné. So she had actually been working for a couple of decades, actually, separating originals from fakes or copies or paintings by followers. And this project is a bit of detective work. Often it's not enough to just see a reproduction of said painting. You have to, if possible, see them in person to prepare an exhibition, especially if they're in private collections and they're not widely published. And normally things I look for example, when I was at Christie's at the auction house, it was really cool because when paintings came in, they had these UV lights with which you could pass over the painting and see if some areas were retouched or if like the signature was tampered. Obviously, you will not always have these tools, but in places like auction houses, you have to deal with attributions and making sure that they're original works by the artist at a really fast pace, even faster than when you're organizing an exhibition. Because as I mentioned, exhibitions take normally several years in the making.
Interesting. Okay, we also had a student that asked, we had two students. One asked, she said, this is one of our art history graduate students. She was mentioned, after observing your curatorial experiences in different parts of the world and working with different subjects in art history, how do you identify different perspectives and narratives and think about inclusivity? And then another student also mentioned, with your years of studying Islamic art, history, and culture, how did that affect you personally, and how it's been represented in American media in today's current political environment? So I feel like these two questions are kind of leading towards, how do you have these dialogues with your exhibitions related to contemporary issues?
Yes, these are very important questions, and there are questions that actually I haven't dealt with much in the exhibitions I've been involved with. And I would have liked to discuss them more at length, because this is actually the core of my interest. But very often, you know, big museums have their set exhibition program, and I hope to one day actually be a permanent curator and then suggest my own exhibition, which involves more of these discussions, especially dealing with topics which are close to my heart, such as Spanish and Latin American art, but also bring in previous interests such as Islamic art. And these are especially pivotal and important projects actually in the United States, where there is a very multicultural, diverse community. And we want to draw in different publics actually, from different backgrounds. And that's why I always try to find, even if it's a European artist, such as Sorolla, I try to look, for example, at his patrons in Latin America, or with Zurbarán paintings that he exported to Peru, and see not only how this dialogue happened from west from Europe to the Americas, or from Europe to like Africa, but intertwining these. I also would like to focus on, for example, how were the material exchanges? What did Spanish artists use from the Americas? Like some materials such as the red paint extracted from the cochinillo beetle, or surfaces such as obsidian brought from Mexico, that Murillo used as a surface to paint some of his paintings. These are matters actually that will broaden our perspective and won't make it just a unilateral kind of discourse of Europe imposing itself on the Americas. And it's also important to look at the context within the Americas and how these objects were perceived and reinterpreted there, that they were not just mechanically copied, but reinterpreted, incorporated in festivities and new spaces, adapted to the local idiom, sometimes even repainted, which were fascinating discoveries in my thesis. And as for the Islamic part element, I feel that this is really relevant as well. If anything, you can even tie in Islamic art to Latin American art and have an even more global discourse. There are, for example, if you go to in certain sites that I saw in Peru, around Cusco, there are churches that have kind of Islamic inspired wooden ceilings, and these influences came from Spain. So you can bring in all these discourses, and this is something I hope to really pursue when I get more chances to really conduct my own projects from the start, which I already started to do in a way with the conference and the discussions I had in Cambridge, and also by attending conferences such as Catherine's in Lima. But I definitely want to engage in more of these discourses in Texas, where the Hispanic community is very important.
Excellent points. And what a great idea, intertwining dialogues. That's such a great concept. And there's just some very inspiring ideas. And I had one question based on some of the students and guest questions here. It struck me about what you said about getting involved in your local communities and your local art museums. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how our students and our community can engage with our local art museums and local communities to enhance our own collections. I know Lucia Abramovich is here in the session, and she's just done a beautiful reinstallation of the folk art collection at the San Antonio Museum of Art and renamed it Arte Popular, and is thinking about community engagement and even the naming of some of our collections. But I was also wanted to ask you, do you think it would be useful for students to build on your ideas of creating like the study day on Bermejo that you did, or the lecture series at the Spanish Embassy, to connect the local exhibitions with the local communities and the local audiences to give back to the community and also engage with the art that's in our towns in Edinburg and McAllen, like ways for students to engage in our local museums?
Of course, yes. Well, sometimes you don't even realize the treasures you have there. For example, one of the things I discovered when I was doing my PhD at King's College was that they had an incredible collection of printed books on Spain and Latin America. So you don't have to think of objects as just paintings and having hierarchies of what objects are, but think of objects in multiple ways. It can be archaeological remains you have from your area. You can have printed books that are available in your local libraries. You can have folkloric art that's produced locally. You can have art that comes from Mexico that's just nearby, no? And how it came to Texas and what the dialogues are between Texas and Mexico, no? So I really encourage you, if you can, during your undergraduate degrees, if you can engage with people such as local curators or librarians even, or institutes, if there's any institute like the Center for Latin American Arts. Maybe it's, I don't know if you're willing to host any small display, but these are opportunities that you can carry out locally. And by all means, create talks and engage your local community, not only academics and students, but also other people from other fields, because I learned tremendous amounts by talking to experts, let's say in history, anthropology, religion, archaeology. These areas are primordial for opening your scope. And as I said, many of you maybe don't do art history as an undergrad, but might do other fields of research and then switch later on. So these are ways to start engaging with these areas at an early stage. And also, if you can, travel around Texas once things are improved, or if you can, as Catherine said, Lucia opened this incredible gallery on Mexican folk art in San Antonio. There's the Houston Hispanic Society exhibition now on Spanish and colonial Latin American art. Come to the Meadows Museum further up in Dallas and discover the Spanish art collections and 20th century Mexican art paintings we have, and also Dallas Museum of Art. So there are plenty of museums and local resources you can make the most of here.
Great points, great points. And also, I was going to point out, I'm sure you're in agreement with this, we have a studio art major senior at the university, and he asked, I'm very interested in museum curatorial work and museum work. Are there careers that are available in, especially modern art, if you have a studio art degree? and in relation. And so he was just kind of curious. He said, I'd never really thought about museum careers, but if you're a studio art major, are there careers in the museum?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So many museums actually have programs which incorporate contemporary artists. I don't know much about, well, actually at the Meadows Museum, they just had, for example, this Spanish artist called Segundino Hernandez, of which there's a painting at the Meadows Museum. He actually came and painted the painting for the collection, no? And it's an incredible work, no? Different shades of gray with torn canvas that is sewn together. And he actually not only spoke with curators and the donors, and he also was very much engaged with the art and art history students at the Southern Methodist University here in Dallas. And the same goes for the National Gallery. There was an artist in residence who basically created an artwork inspired by a work in the collection. So there's certainly projects out there that you can look at that involve museums and artists. And it's a very important asset to have to involve this contemporary discourse with local artists.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I wanted to add, one of the best lectures I've ever been to was a lecture that Marion Ettinger organized at the San Antonio Museum of Art, and he invited artists, studio artists, to come and speak about paintings next to art historians. So an art historian gave their art historical lecture on a series of paintings, and then a studio artist presented their analysis of the paintings. And it was so interesting to see the two fields connect, and based on different fields of talent and expertise, but to come up with new and innovative ideas. It was one of my favorite lectures to collaborate with studio artists. And our final question, because I wanted to respect everyone's time, and I know everyone's very busy, but I'm so thankful you're all here. I had one last question from two students. One from one of my students in my South American Vice Regal class. She asked, alongside one of our other graduate students, a very real question, which is, what do you do when you feel discouraged or overwhelmed? Maybe you get turned down from a fellowship you really wanted to get and applied for with all your heart, but you didn't get it. What's the most difficult part of these moments of disappointment when applying to these programs? Can you speak a little bit about the challenges that you've had to face, and also how to be resilient and keep working even on those days when you feel discouraged?
No, that's a valid point. Like, you have to think both of the successes and then those opportunities that didn't happen, no? And these will come. It's unavoidable. You're not going to have never-ending luck, no? And especially when you start off, it is very difficult. I must have applied to, I don't know how many internships and volunteering positions as an undergrad, especially. And having those first positions that kind of establish you on the path towards getting the big fellowships and internships are tricky, actually. But I think you have to think, well, can I travel? Can I be flexible? These are two matters that are quite important for a curatorial career, actually, especially when you're trying to establish yourself before getting a permanent position. For example, I struggled getting funding at first for my PhD. And at times it is difficult because you don't know where to apply, no? I, little by little, started discovering about this Center of Estudios Europa Hispánica in Madrid that sponsored all these PhDs, and now it has actually multiplied, and there are many opportunities in the UK and Ireland. So I especially encourage you, something that has helped me was really being in contact with as many people as possible, really asking. Feel free to ask Catherine for my email, and I will send any more information if you have specific queries about any of the fellowships or information I provided. but you have to not be afraid to network and speak out and present your research. The more people that hear your research, of course, you have to prepare it so it's in a presentable state, the more you will be exposed and you might get approached by people. And that's what I found, that at the beginning it was difficult because I didn't have a very clear area of interest. I love so much. I like Islamic art, I like Spanish art, Latin American art. But once I found my area of interest, then it came quite clear what path I wanted to pursue, but it doesn't always have to be a clear path. Who knows, I might end up in academia or other areas. I'm open, and that's important. You have to be open to explore. And if you can, some areas like going into academia doesn't mean that you're saying goodbye to museums. You can still curate an exhibition as an academic, and vice versa. You can also work with universities as a curator. Auction houses work close with collectors, museums, so they're all interconnected. So I wouldn't be too adamant about following this specific route, and if it doesn't work out, everything falls apart. Just continue trying different possibilities and try as many as you can before you reach your more advanced PhD studies or during them. And then you'll have a clearer idea of what is out there. Just try to expand beyond your personal research. Reach out, meet people during these difficult times. Maybe instead you can't meet them in person, but try joining virtual lectures, asking things. In my case, email me if you want more personal, one-to-one feedback on curatorial opportunities. I'm open to all of this, and I encourage you all to pursue a career in museums or other areas of art history.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Akemi. These are all such wonderful ideas. And I wanted to encourage everyone, if you have any further questions, please visit our website for the Center for Latin American Arts, because we are here locally to help you achieve these goals and accomplish what Akemi's been talking about. And please reach out to me at CLAA@utrgv.edu if I can connect you with Akemi, or if you would like to connect with me as director of the center, I would be delighted and honored to help you advance your career in the arts and in whatever field you're in. So thank you so much for attending tonight, and the Center for Latin American Arts and UTRGV and myself. I want to thank you so much, Akemi, for coming today, and we're honored and inspired by your ideas tonight, and we are also excited to visit the Meadows Museum, physically and virtually.
Exactly. There's a whole online catalog you can research, and our upcoming exhibitions, and past exhibitions, there's all this information online if you're interested. So please reach out, and hopefully I will get to meet you in person one day when the situation improves.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Thank you, Catherine. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.